Support for this episode comes from UNCSA's School of Filmmaking. Tell your own story. Master the art of storytelling at the UNCSA School of Filmmaking, ranked the top public film school in the nation by The Hollywood Reporter and ninth best overall. At UNCSA, students learn to craft compelling narratives across genres, styles, and mediums, all while utilizing cutting-edge technologies. Graduates are skilled in every aspect of the cinematic arts and specialize in areas such as cinematography, directing, and screenwriting. From day one, UNCSA supports student projects with financial and technical resources, helping the next generation of filmmakers turn their dreams into reality. The hands-on curriculum is taught by industry professionals with decades of real-world experience. And every day is a networking opportunity with guest artists like Oscar-winning actor Troy Kotsur and Disney screenwriting legend Linda Wolverton. Filmmaking graduates go on to excel in their fields, becoming innovators, leaders, and creative forces in the industry, like Danny McBride and Jeff Nichols, or Emmy award-winning sound designer Will Files. Unleash your creativity. Visit uncsa.edu/filmmaking to start your journey.
And it also, when you work with incredible actors, they just make me better. I feel like they just, I remember that feeling when I first did my first scene with Cillian in Oppenheimer. You know, the first take, he looked at me and I saw his eyes change, and you're just like, oh, and you're just brought into his world. And it's just such a gift to work with really talented people because they bring out the best in you.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Dylan Arnold is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character?
Well, I think I read the scene with as much separation as I can. I think it's anytime I have any initial ideas, because I think I really want to dive into the work. I really love diving into the work. So I think almost recently, my initial approach has been trying not to get too involved too soon. Because I think as I read a scene, I'll immediately have these ideas, but I almost need to put those to the side before I finish the entire scene or the entire movie or the entire play, to figure out what the journey of the character is. Because I think it's really easy to get locked into something if you have an idea out of context, and it's sometimes hard to let go of that. So I almost think recently I've been trying to separate myself a little more. But I don't know, I've been given so many different tools for what I went to, because I went to University of North Carolina School of the Arts and studied acting there. And they gave us a tool belt. They really gave us a lot of things to work with. And they would say there's not one way to work. There's a lot of different ways to work, and you just kind of pick and choose what suits you. So I actually think I do have kind of a different approach for, depending on the day, not even the character, depending on how I'm feeling that day. Sometimes I feel like I just want to figure out what the character is not saying, because sometimes the scene lends itself to that. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward and you don't have to think too much. I think it's really easy to overthink things, because often I love thinking about acting and how it falls in line with just living. And, because often when we talk, when we speak, we're thinking something else. We're not thinking about what the words that we're saying. So I think that trying to find that lane in an acting sense of being like, okay, how can my mind wander beyond what's on the page to kind of flesh it out a little more. And then it also just gets me out of my head, because I think it's really easy to just hammer something in and overthink it, where it's like, if I'm able to separate myself from what's going on and get into my body, that's, I feel like, when I'm the most grounded.
You know how exciting that is to hear that from you so young. You're already there, like thinking about it like that. right? That's so huge, man. Like, how did you get to that? Because this feels like the idea of being worried about overthinking is something I think comes so late for some people, you know, because it is really a problem.
Yeah.
That is like being able to temper yourself and be like, I'm not gonna, because you're scared, right? When you get a role, you're like,
right.
Wait, I know how to do this. Oh, well, that line. Oh, I know how that line goes. Yeah. And you want to just have it locked in.
Right.
The idea of being worried about yourself locking in is so huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always wanted to figure out how I can get better, how I can get closer to a character, how I can make something more meaningful to myself and to the story. That's always been really important for me. And yeah, when we were saying earlier about how when something feels far from you, when something scares you, it often brings out the best in you. You know, it's when you get relaxed and complacent and like, oh, I can do this in my sleep, that you're not exploring, you're not making interesting choices. You're not forced to dig into the character and be like, okay, why are they doing what they're doing? How can I connect with this? Even if a character is so far from myself, how am I able to connect with them? So I think I'm kind of realizing and learning to give over to the fear a little more, and trust that I can handle it, because I think that, you know, it is, I mean, I remember when I auditioned for Oppenheimer and when I was doing all that process, you know, there's this idea, and I think a lot of actors have this, where it's this idea of a job. It's almost like when you get a job, you possess something, you have something, and the way the industry is, it makes you feel like you have value finally if you get a job, because it's like, for so many actors, I mean, there's so many actors who are out of work all the time. Even working actors are out of work for years at a time. And it's really easy to equate your value to the jobs that you have. And so I think that I did find this thing, you know, when I got Oppenheimer, I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be in a Christopher Nolan movie. And then immediately I was like, holy shit, I'm going to be in a Christopher Nolan movie. Like, that is terrifying. But it really... it was such a learning experience, because it really forced me to get on my A game and do as much research as I could and just show up and not overthink it, because you can't. If you get too in your head about something, it's just gonna derail.
Are you an official Oppen homie?
I am an Oppen homie. Okay. I'm in the group chat.
I've had so many of these guys, I guess they're almost all guys, on. And it feels like isn't it weird that they're all, tell me if I'm wrong, and tell me if you're included in this, they approach this thing so deeply. Everybody's character. Right? I'm talking about before even Nolan is involved. Right. Like, just the idea of being cast, it feels like everybody went through that process.
I think everyone did. It was unspoken. I think that Chris has said that everyone knew more about their characters than he did. You know, it's like in the end. I mean, he said this. It's because I think everyone had that element of just, okay, I'm in the big leagues now. This is you know, I got to be on my A game. And so I think everyone did as much research as they could. They came in as prepared as they could. And not only did it inform the movie, but I think it informed all of us on set, you know, because I do remember having these really profound moments where I'd be on set, you know, on the Los Alamos set, and I'd look at the other actors around me, and you just felt like you were in the world. People were sitting in very particular ways and leaning in particular ways, and it just all felt alive in this kind of intangible way that I really did every day kind of look around, and I was like, this is special. Beyond who was directing and who wrote it. You know, it's like just being around these other actors who are so committed and so wonderful and have such insane careers in their own right. And the fact that every single person, you know, Matt Damon included, was like, isn't this cool that we're here? Isn't this cool that we're on this set? You know, and when you have someone like that, it just, yes, it is. And it's always cool. And it's always cool when you get to make a movie, because, you know, you feel so fortunate. But yeah, I think there is this level of respect that everybody has for Chris that forced everyone to kind of just bring their all.
Imagine my experience being in the theater and then seeing you come on the screen, and I'm with my friend, and you was always my guilty pleasure show. I can't talk to a lot of people about it. I mean, now after season 4, I think I can talk to people about it. But at that time, I think 3 had come out maybe.
Yeah.
And third season is a transformative season for me because that season was so batshit crazy.
It really was. It really was. They threw everything at the fan.
And I don't usually like things like this, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about this, but really your performance in that season, seeing a different kind of thing, you know what I mean? And the seeing like this guy has range here. I heard that you had a long relationship with you and you were auditioned for almost every role every season. I mean, that's another sign, right? Like they knew maybe you weren't right for certain things according to them, but they kept having you come back.
Yeah.
Do you start to like have to question like, what's my approach here do I have to change what I'm doing here? They're having me come back. They must like me.
Right.
I must be doing something right.
I mean, to me, having the knowledge that often it really has very little to do with the talent, you know what I mean? And it's so, even though casting directors say it, even though being on the other side of it, if you're, you know, involved in any sort of casting, you see it, it's so hard to convince yourself that that's true because you want to feel like you have some sort of control. You want to feel like you can do that one thing or hit that one moment that they're going to be like, the part's his. You know, and sometimes there are little things in there that kind of reveal the character, but I think that in that instance, you know, if I'm called back for the same project and a different character, I take that as a win, you know, and I figure they like me. They're just trying to figure out if I fit into the world. So I think that I don't really approach, of course I approach the characters differently. It's a different character, you know, and I think that in that regard, I can feel like I fit into a character in a better way than another one. You know, I think Penn is perfect for Joe. I think that, you know, I don't wish I had that role.
I would like to see a Dylan Arnold season 1.
That would be an interest. But here's the thing, it would be a completely different show, you know? It might work, it might not, but there's no way to know.
But here's the thing though. So after you and after Oppenheimer, do you start to, with your team, have this meeting or this, maybe it's not formally like that, about, okay, here's the way my career is going now.
Yeah.
This is where I wanted to go. And how do I kind of diversify this? I don't know, because I'm trying to lead up to Lady in the Lake, which is a perfect kind of, for you, I feel, showing how different you can be in different roles. A lot of people don't have this in their back catalog, and they hit a spot, I feel, a wall in terms of showing what they can do. And if you do this early, I feel, so I'm just trying to find out if this was conscious, like the diversity of roles.
I mean, listen, there is so much, like we were saying, there is so much out of your control when it comes to this stuff. You know, I only had as much control as my approach and how I looked, whatever, for Oppenheimer and Lady in the Lake. And, you know, it's like all those things, you just kind of do your work. But in terms of how I always wanted my career to go, it was that sort of, I want to keep surprising myself with the sort of things that I do. And ideally, you know, I could maybe surprise other people. Like we were saying earlier, like I think I would love to have a career where it's like, oh, you were in that? Oh, you were also in that? Oh, you were, you know, it's like, because I think that reflects getting lost in developing and exploring a character in a really full way. And that's always what I want to do. I'm really interested in different characters and challenging myself. And so I think that, I mean, it really was kind of the perfect thing. What I was looking for and wanting was something that was challenging and scary and different from what I had done. And there is this element, you know, it's like I had played some similar characters, some kind of youthful sort of boy next door, sort of whatever. And so I think that for me, like, that's great. Those are great. But I want something that is going to keep me up at night to be like, how am I going to pull this off? And I think that any time that I have that approach, although it's terrifying and you almost don't want to go in that space, you almost, because it's terrifying to fail. The idea of failing on a big scale like that is just, it's awful. But I think that I've found that when you give over to it, it just yields really rich results not only in the final product, but in the experience on set. And that's what I'm trying to also look for as well, is new, different experiences on set. Because the reality is, you know, the difference between film and theater, it's like theater, it kind of feels like yours more. It feels like yours during the whole process. Where film, it's like part of it's yours, but it's also the director and the editor, and the, you know, it's like everything else coming together. So I'm trying to look for things that really invigorate me on the day when I'm doing the work, because that's what needs to be meaningful to me. Because if you're just focused on the final product, I feel like very rarely you're going to feel fulfilled.
Right. Before we get to Alma, let's talk about, were you able to size up at this point what kind of director works best with you, or what kind of approach from a director? Because you just came from working with somebody who people consider a great actor's director, Nolan. You know, I heard nothing but great things. Small set, small things, almost approaching it like an independent film. It seems great for actors, you know. But I wanted to know if you were just kind of realizing what works best for you at this point.
You know, I've found that most of the directors I've worked with, I've found something about them that I like. I think that also maybe that's just the approach that I feel like I have to have in order to have a successful working relationship. Right. You know what I mean? You know,
you have to be malleable, you know?
I guess. Yeah, exactly. But I think, I mean, you know, I worked with Chris and then I worked with Alma back to back, which was just like, I think I was filled with so much information and so much creative excitement in the span of a year that it really lit me up in these really wonderful ways. I think that, I mean, Chris and Alma, both incredible directors. I would obviously love to work with both of them again. Very different approaches, you know? I think Chris, he speaks very little. He gives very few notes. It's kind of just the essential, which, you know, we were talking earlier about over-explaining to an actor, and it's like he doesn't do that. He kind of just gives you the minimum and then trusts the actors. And he said, I read an interview with him where he's like, the reason why he doesn't give much direction is because he feels like the director's job should be done after casting. That once you find the people that you can trust, you let them do their thing. Right. Which is, and in that regard, I think Alma and Chris are very similar. They have a deep respect for actors. They have a deep love and admiration for what actors do. And I think that when you work with a director like that, you feel safe and you feel encouraged and you feel supported, which if an actor doesn't feel supported or encouraged or safe, you're not going to get good work out of them. Or it's going to be very difficult. Right. So Chris, you know, fairly hands-off unless he needed to be and needed to guide a moment, which he did occasionally. Alma, on the other hand, very hands-on, very, you know, I remember the first scene that I filmed with her, we spent the entire day on that scene, which was a scene with Natalie. It was like a 5 or 7 page scene. It was the first thing I shot. And we spent the entire day on that scene. So to have that luxury, especially on your first day on a project, to be like, hey, we're in no rush. Yeah. We can mess this around. We can try things. And so crazy. She led me through breath work. She kind of had me stand up and pat my body, wake up my body, you know. So there was this kind of explorative, almost theater school approach to the way that Alma worked, which I loved. You know, don't get me wrong, I really loved working with both of them, and it was different. But I think that for me, figuring out what kind of director I would be excited to work with, it's kind of that person who allows the space to fail and try things, because that's when you discover. I remember that I did a take where she said, she walked up to me and she goes, I want you to try to do too much this next take. Do whatever you think might be too much, and I promise you I won't make you look bad. And I was like, and I trusted her, and I was like, okay. And so I was able to... Dude,
I'm almost teary-eyed right now.
Me too. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Isn't that what you want? I mean,
it's such love.
And trust. And saying
trust.
Like, just go... do something bad, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's gonna be. I won't show it though.
Right. Yeah, if it's really that bad, it's not gonna go in. Yeah. Everyone wants this to be a good product, you know. So.
And then there's other people on sets that have to fight for a second take.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Never mind, like spending time. I don't know.
I mean, well, that's also. I mean, Chris does very few takes. He does probably 3 takes, and usually the way that, at least the way that I worked with him, or the way that he worked with me, was And when I was on set was maybe the first take is yours.
Yeah.
Maybe second take is also yours.
Yeah.
Third take, if he's not getting something, he'll give you a note.
Interesting.
But then Chris is very like, also the difference between the once you've done something that they like, Chris will just be very nonchalant. Okay, good, moving on. And then oh, wow, that must have been good because he wouldn't have done that. Where Alma, It's like she'll come up and she'll grasp you and she'll say, yes, baby, yes. It's like, yes. Yeah. And so it's a very different approach. Both are wonderful. But no, you're right. Like to have that freedom to fail, because it's freedom to fail, but it's freedom to try things that explore and that's when spontaneity can come. And on that take where she said do too much, I did what I thought was too much, and she walks up and she goes, that was good. That was good. And I see, and when I watch the final scene, I'm like, I'm noticing those moments where I'm like, I would have never taken that risk to do that in that moment if I felt like it was too precious.
You're literally describing the job of the director. That's the director should be doing that. So like being able to see too much for you, thinking it's too much. It's actually not too much because you have that certain kind of approach, and she knew to get that. You know what I mean? That's directing.
And it's also this idea of letting go of the containment. I think that it can be really, if you're scared to be bad, you can almost be in this protective bubble to be like, okay, I want to be very careful with all my movements. But it's like, if you're doing that too much, you're going to be stilted. You're going to be reserved. Or it's like in life, we're not thinking about being too big. We, sometimes we are very big. Sometimes we are very massive in the way that we express things. And so giving yourself that freedom to just not feel too precious about how it turns out winds up,
And the scary thing, the frustrating thing about this story is that there are maybe people, and maybe some of them who you've worked with, who would love to approach things like this, but there's no time.
Yes.
So do you know what she did? Did she insist on this kind of time for the show? Because it's probably paid the dividends that we needed to pay.
Right. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know exactly the conversations about the timing of that. I mean, I know we did 7 episodes in about 6 months, which is
that's a lot.
Which is a lot of time. I mean, I think it helped that she was directing all the episodes.
Yes.
She kind of had that control. She was an executive producer. She was, to my knowledge, the showrunner. In terms of that way that a showrunner would work. So I think that she wanted time the way that she works because, but it's tough. You don't always have that. You don't always have the luxury of time. So I think figuring out how you can muddy the waters in a safe way when you don't have a lot of time is really important to figure out. I think rehearsals really help. I think that, but again, if you don't have time, a lot of people don't have that luxury. So it is tough. It is. I always think that time is going to yield the best results because it allows you to really dig your teeth into it and explore.
There are some scenes you have to do in this which would be labeled difficult by some people. Okay.
Sure.
Let's just no spoilers. Right? Are you the kind of actor that has to stay in that emotional space between takes in order to keep that going? Do you need an environment around you? Like, I almost was going to ask, like, is it bad if a fellow actor is kind of nice to you when it's not supposed to be like that? You know what I mean? I'm getting in the methody, methody kind of stuff, which exactly, quote unquote.
I think that for me, I try to not have a requirement of the environment around me because that's out of your control, and you don't want to be someone who lets the things out of your control get in the way of your work because I think that that's just going to get in the way of yourself. I don't feel like when I have really high emotional scenes, I don't feel like I have to stay in it, but I do feel like I have to keep it kind of just bubbling at the surface. I can't I don't feel like I can, and some people can't. I don't feel like I can go from a really emotional take, and then when they're setting up a new angle and I have 5-10 minutes just going to shoot the shit and just being like, what's up? So what are you doing this weekend? And just being totally myself. But I also don't think it's great to make other people's lives difficult in that. Like, I think that there's a balance that I try to find where I'm like, I might just go off in a corner, just sit in my chair and just kind of like keep breathing and just like stay in the moment and then get ready to go in. But, I don't feel like I need to do it to the extent that I like have to keep living it all the time, because also you're gonna get burnt the hell out.
Yeah.
If you just keep that emotion, it is draining. It is exhausting. And I remember I had an acting teacher that said, at the end of the day or after a scene, if you're just suddenly exhausted, you did it right. If you still have energy, you didn't do it right.
That's interesting.
And I do find that it is really fascinating that when I'm in the middle of the scene, I have all this energy, and the second the scene's over, it's almost like my body just like releases, and it's like, oh, okay, and I just get exhausted. And so that's always a good sign.
Right.
But yeah, I think having just it all percolating there helps me just keep a hold on it.
And is this also true then, that sometimes rehearsal can actually be detrimental in a way, because you're kind of doing, especially with scenes like that, where you're kind of letting stuff out when the camera's not rolling? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that it's more for me, it's that I only think rehearsal can be detrimental if you discover a really wonderful thing in rehearsal and you try to recreate it. Because anytime you try to recreate something that you did, it's never going to work.
Yes.
It's never going to be as effective, because you're trying to conjure this thing that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that rehearsal can be really wonderful if you're able to just use it to inform, and then when you do the take, let yourself breathe and be in this moment and not try to pull something that you did. So I think
that's huge, bro. That is huge, what you just said. Like, I never heard anyone say it like that. You're making me change my thinking of rehearsal, because it's so true. Like, it actually could be bad if you find something there that you want to recreate.
Right.
Then as a director, you would have to try and stop that, which is so hard to do, because everyone's like, I found it.
Right. It's like the idea of like, if you do a wide shot and just suddenly the tears come in the wide shot, immediately so many people, I'll speak for myself, but I imagine a lot of people are like, shit, I got to do that again. I got to do that again when the camera comes. It's like, but I think that as much as you're able to let go and just be where you're at, I think that often that keeps it alive.
Yeah.
But
what you said then is just like, instead of using it like for that, you have to almost approach it. You have to almost go in with the thinking, like you said, of it's not about finding something and recreating. It's just about discovery of it. But even that's hard to do, though. It's almost like you almost have to have a lockdown on the idea of, I don't know, like you're shifting my whole paradigm about that. No, really, because it is really true that you have to worry now about, because that could actually be a waste of time.
Right.
You could be sent down another road.
You could be trapped. You could be trapped in an idea of it, and you don't want to be trapped in an idea of it. I feel like if explaining, like, I feel like rehearsal is for building the outline and the shape of it, and then when you're doing it, that's when you're coloring inside.
Yes.
And filling it out. But I think if you're trying to do all of it during the rehearsal process, you're just going to lose it all.
Because that there's a story that Ethan Hawke tells on this show, and he probably told it on other shows.
Yeah, I listened to his.
I'm talking about Philip Seymour Hoffman on the set of, before they filmed Sidney Lumet's Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. And they're like, all right, let's just do it. It's an insane scene. And Sidney's like, all right, let's just try it. And like Phil starts to do it half.
Yeah.
Just half energy.
Yeah.
And Sidney Lumet's like, why are you doing it? I want you to do it. He's like, wait, you want me to do it like for real now? He's like, yeah, we're doing a rehearsal. Like, the cameras aren't even there.
Right.
And like but Hawke tells the story as like, you have to do it full on there. You know what I mean? Like, why are you doing it? And she's talking about one of our greatest actors, right? Ever.
Yeah.
Who, it's kind of shocking that he wouldn't want to do it. But now it's making me think, like, maybe you should do it half.
I think it depends per person. I think that everyone has their own process. For him, I imagine he realized, I can't put it all out there on the rehearsal. Otherwise, I mean, I would assume from experience, he has realized that he doesn't.
Right.
I can't imagine him being lazy.
He's not a slack.
Because he's no, he's not.
No.
He doesn't seem like that kind of actor. I think that everyone has a different process, and I mean, I think there is some element to like you got to discover the moments in rehearsal, and figure out where they are. So you can't mark it, but I do get the sense of at least giving yourself the freedom to just find it, not feel like you have to have found it in the rehearsal.
Yes. So we're talking about how Alma's approach laid the groundwork for you to be able to do things that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do if there wasn't this acceptance and this this kind of support.
Yeah.
When it gets done, and I don't know if you could be objective about seeing it. I don't know if have you seen it yet?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
The full.
Yes.
So you did really incredible work in the show, man. So are you able to like stand back and be like, okay, this was a challenge where I have realized before this, I want to be a little scared. And I faced this fear and I did it. And I had support.
Yeah.
And this helped me.
Yeah.
And now, where do you go next then? Because so often in this damn business, you're not going to get that, right?
Right.
But are you going to demand it? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you approach your career now after these two things that were so fulfilling and so exciting? And how do you ensure that this is the way things go now?
I think that I can take away how I want to approach work and how it makes it meaningful for me. Like, at the end of the day, I love acting so much. I love this. I love working with different people. I love the idea of telling different stories. So, it's a combination of being like, what kind of projects do I want to be a part of now that I've kind of seen this, but without expecting it to be the exact same, because it's not going to be. The reality is, like, even if I imagine, even if I work with Alma again, it probably won't be exactly the same. It's like, so I think that mostly taking it from a standpoint of how do I want to approach my work? What can I control? And what do I want to bring to a character? But yeah, like there is an element of like, oh, okay, I have realized that these things that scare me can yield really exciting results. And not even the final product, but just how I feel on set. And so I think that in that regard, I think I want to give myself a little more agency to go out there and put myself out there in ways that maybe I wouldn't before, because I'd be worried about being bad, so I'd be playing it safe or whatever. And it's like, but I think that when you take risks, that's when this kind of intangible sort of magic is created.
Cillian Arnold, I want you to come back on the show.
I would love to come back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a really wonderful conversation.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.